All right. Hello guys. I appreciate y'all having me here as like the anon zooming in. Bonjour. I'll just go ahead and get started here. We've got a lot to get through. I'm going to keep this hopefully this doesn't bore people too much. It's basically going to be a 20-minute lecture attempting to run through the entirety of NFT history in about 20 minutes. So we'll see how this goes. So yeah, starting in October 31st, 2008, Satoshi releases the Bitcoin white paper to the world. This is obviously a large moment looking back. We see that there's this moment where we now have true ownership of decentralized assets. And this was really just not there was no sort of paradigm like this online. All of our JPEGs were right click savable. All of our money was just uh, there was no scarcity of money. It was a very large moment to add scarcity to our internet digital lives, not having to be federally enforced. So, yeah, about a few months later, the Bitcoin Genesis block gets mined, and that kicks everything off. Roughly about 2 years or so after that, like the Bitcoin's getting going, and there's some talk of using the same technology, blockchain technology, to create a domain name system, okay, a DNS system. And that is something that Satoshi is, you can find him writing about this a little bit. And that ends up becoming, coming to life as a blockchain, the second blockchain ever called Namecoin. Okay. So in the NFT archaeology, NFT history world, we're really just looking back and just trying to see anywhere we find on chain a digital object primitive. Okay. So not the fungible object primitive, but the digital object primitive that is a unique object. And Namecoin fits that in a lot of ways to us. So as collectors, looking back in time, we find the Namecoin domains to be generally thought of as the first NFTs. So this is very similar to your ENS names or your .btc names or any of these other domain name system names that are decentralized Web3 versions of domain names. And these are .bit domains. Okay, so April 2011, the first NFT is created, D/Bitcoin, also Bitcoin.bit is what it's referred to as. And yeah, that really kicks off NFTs, and people are using this Namecoin network to essentially speculate. They're buying Google.bit, Yahoo.bit, all of the interesting, boring things you would imagine people would speculate on. And then we move along a few months there, and then people start doing something interesting. So, just very early on, we naturally see people experimenting with the technologies that they're given. So, they're supposed to use it for domain names, right? They're basically just trying to, have everybody move to this decentralized true ownership over domain paradigm. But people start like kind of carving in little like emojis and ASCII art into the Namecoin blockchain very simply by okay, I can make any domain name that I want. Instead of just, doing normal characters, I'm going to start putting ASCII art into the blockchain. So you get these fun, like little faces and like little stories. There's like a table flipping one. And we call these puny codes. And they're basically just an encoding standard that allows people to do more than just basic characters in their domains. So early on, we're seeing like these very early attempts. Calling it art is somewhat debatable, but ASCII art to me does feel like humans are trying to use this medium to express themselves and tokenize their art in these domains. We'll flash forward a few years here, and the creator of what is now called Stacks, back then he created this first service called One Name. Okay, so experimenting very early on Namecoin here in February 2014. One Name is basically going to take the Namecoin blockchain and its attempt to create identities around these domain names. Okay. So we now understand this concept of identity. It's a huge part, especially for like just like Ethereum and Solana people. Like the identity being tied to the wallet is a very large part of what we do. It literally, when you see a wallet address that you recognize or an ENS name, that like a person comes to mind, an avatar, an identity comes to mind. And that's what One Name did. So they allowed you to basically take your domain name. So say you owned like brad.bit, and then you had a little bit of extra space there, and you could associate metadata to that. Okay. If this doesn't sound familiar, this is basically what an NFT is. It's a token, and then you can associate whatever you want to it with metadata. And then in that way, our brains kind of associate all of that as being part of this token. And people were able to just click a few buttons and tokenize their Twitter profile. So we see people taking their avatars, which is just an image stored on their Twitter, and then they're taking their bio and they're taking a link to their Twitter, and they're just storing that in metadata on the blockchain on Namecoin associated with, for example, Brad.bit. And then you get this sort of identity that's created. And as collectors, we like to go back and collect some of these interesting identities. We think it's very cool that just, very early on, people are using identities, using blockchains for more than just currency. They're using it for domain names, and then they're using it for identities. Like pretty early on, we're starting to see that. We also start to see people around this time begin to actually encode images into the blockchain. There's someone who like coded an image in over the course of like a couple thousand domain names, where you take a few you take a few little pieces of the image and of the JPEG and encode it into a blockchain, and then when you put them all together and write a script to pull that out, you would be able to put together an image, which is kind of fun. Then now moving along, we'll kind of leave off Namecoin here. Namecoin largely is considered to have failed as like a blockchain. However, as collectors of historical NFTs, we still go back and enjoy looking and studying this history and being able to collect. So now moving over to a couple months later, also in 2014, on Bitcoin, the counterparty protocol is released. And this is basically, it kind of feels like it's a layer two or something, but it's still on Bitcoin layer one, completely secured by the decentralization of Bitcoin layer one. And this is a protocol to basically release tokens. So they were initially thinking, hey, it's kind of like I want to issue another Bitcoin, but you can call it whatever you want. So people just start issuing all these random tokens, test token, all these different things. And very quickly, people again start to use this not just as like currencies, but to actually store art and store assets for video games. So we see in March 2015, Spells of Genesis, Shaban creates the first tokenized, the first game with tokenized assets in that game. So the actual in-game items in Spells of Genesis are trading cards. Okay, it's kind of like a game where you put cards up against each other and kind of fight them. And he created the FD card and the Satoshi card and a bunch of these other cards and had this awesome artwork created for them, and basically issued these tokens on Counterparty. And then people would literally just collect these cards. It's basically like tokenizing trading cards. It's like the most kind of obvious use case, like similar to an NFT for blockchains. We're going to tokenize our baseball cards, tokenize our trading cards. So that happens. And, uh, we get some interesting moments there where this second project, Saratobi, also an early blockchain game on iOS mobile, where you can basically swing a monkey and see how far it'll go. And the further you go, you would actually get little airdrops of Bitcoin, and you would earn Bitcoin. And this is a play to earn game by Christian Moss. And those two games had this interesting moment where Christian Moss decided to take a card from Spells of Genesis and make it playable in his game Saratobi. Okay. And we look back and we think of this as a pretty important moment because it represents the first instance of interoperability between two independent games. So Christian was basically going to do kind of this like marketing tactic. This was his approach at the time, marketing tactic to attract the Spells of Genesis players to come play his game. So you could take the Saratobi card, the CMP card, and the Satoshi card. And if you had them, it would actually show up in Saratobi as different artwork, but still the same underlying token. And this is, my personal belief is this is kind of the future of a lot of this stuff. This is what the metaverse is. We kind of think of this as potentially the birth of the metaverse moment. Okay. And then moving along here, we get the birth of the modern crypto art movement with rare Pepes. So for people who don't know, Pepe has long time been a meme on the internet, and Bitcoiners decided to start trying to make them rare and using the blockchain technology not to only have, scarcity with our magical internet money, but also scarcity with our Pepes. And thus the rare Pepe movement is born. And that happens in September 2016. This is the Nakamoto card is created. This is inspired by the Satoshi card. These guys basically saw what Shaban was doing with Spells of Genesis and was like, hey, we can do this, but instead of using it for cards in a video game, we're going to do crypto art. We're going to have a bunch of artists submit their art as these like Pepe themed cards. And then we'll just, in a somewhat decentralized manner, create this very large collection that ended up being 1,774 cards. And they would accept a card, it would go into the Rare Pepe directory, and that card would become officially part of Rare Pepes. And to this day, there's a very large active collector base of this, and Rare Pepes are still thriving, and there's many more continuations of that movement. And obviously, crypto art ended up becoming a pretty big deal. And we kind of largely think of that as like catalyzing that movement. A bunch of the modern crypto artists that you know today got their start as like Rare Pepe scientists or Rare Pepe memers. So then moving along here. So you get some early experiments on Ethereum with, people tried DNS systems as well for like the Lineage and Ether ID, and then ENS in 2017. You get people doing some interesting art experiments like curio cards in 2017. And really, the huge moment that like we think about is like the CryptoPunks moment. There were many NFT collections on Ethereum actually before June 2017, but that moment in June 2017, June 9th, 2017 is a very big deal. We can now look at this timeline that's up on the big screen here. This is specifically Ethereum NFTs. I have to work on my timeline for all NFTs is a work in progress. It's been going on for a year, so sorry I don't have that ready. There's a lot on it. But if we look at June 2017 here, we see the V1 CryptoPunks contract. And Larva Labs basically releases CryptoPunks to the world. There ends up being a small bug in that marketplace functionality, and they end up releasing a second contract later. That is the CryptoPunks V2 contract, and that is what we know is the official CryptoPunks today. Of course, this is blockchain, it's immutable. There's still 10,000 V1 CryptoPunks. So we basically have 20,000 CryptoPunks across these two contracts, and collectors collect both of these. Yeah. And then moving along further, we eventually see more people playing around with, hey, let's do 1,000 ETH. Let's do the $1 million homepage idea. The idea is like, let's do scarcity, let's do land. You see the data creeps and weirdos, which is another art experiment. It's like, a platform for crypto artists to create their art and put it in this collection together. You see crypto cats, you see moon cats. And then the really big moment to me is crypto kitties here. Okay. So this is where, this guy, Dieter Shirley, is working on this proposal on GitHub starting in September 2017 for a standard called the ERC 721. It's a proposal for non-fungible tokens on Ethereum. Okay. This is really important because up until this point, nobody really knows how to talk to these smart contracts, right? Everybody's implementing their own marketplaces, everybody's implementing their own standards. And it would be really hard to have an exchange like OpenSea or have a wallet like MetaMask that shows all of your NFTs if you couldn't have some sort of easy standard that can just like read from this. Okay. So that gets introduced in the form of CryptoKitties on November 23rd, 2017. And that is the kind of viral moment for NFTs. Dapper Labs creates this project with Dieter Shirley and Roham, and it's kind of an instant success. It's a one-hit wonder a little bit. They have had Top Shot a few years later, but that was just like nothing really comes close. People, compared to CryptoKitties week of craziness in November and December 2017, nobody really cared about CryptoPunks at the time. This is where you get some articles, in large publications talking about NFTs. This attracts people to come and build in the ecosystem. And really, this moment catalyzes a bunch of builders to go in, build out what we have today, like OpenSea. I mean, even the Bored Ape Yacht Club founders were breeding CryptoKitties this week. It was a very important moment in the space, definitely a turning point. And all that money that got brought in also attracted venture capitalists to fund the space. And it also attracted just other builders to come build. There's, many clones of CryptoKitties, and it's puppies instead, right? But there's all these different clones of CryptoKitties that following year, if you're looking in 2018, but also some other just super interesting experiments. So we see some people starting to experiment with generative art. So crypto arte is like this really interesting experiment. We later in 2019 get autoglyphs, and you actually see people starting to experiment with AI art as well. This is really just because like AI art couldn't really have been a thing up until like maybe early 2018 because like the GAN models just didn't exist. So you get some people experimenting with AI art, and this is why I really do when I look at a timeline of NFT history. Yes, there is this giant timeline of like all non-fungible tokens. Anywhere we look on a blockchain and can technically define that like there is a non-fungible token here, that is interesting to us as collectors. That said, there's also a timeline for basically every category in the NFT space as well. So if we're looking at like PFPs, for example, you get this CryptoPunks moment that's really interesting. And then it largely isn't that big of a deal, though. People mostly don't care until Bored Ape Yacht Club comes out several years later. And before that, specifically, CryptoPunks are starting to get used around early 2021 as profiles on Twitter. This is finally kind of manifesting itself, and people are realizing they're going to build their identities around their CryptoPunk. You get some interesting moments in there, like there's this early derivative of CryptoPunks called Pride Punks in 2018. In 2019, there's another project called Crypto Skulls that has a 10,000 pixelated skulls instead of these faces of punks. And yeah, basically you can reconstruct a timeline. And if you have time, I would highly encourage you, if there is an area of NFTs that you really are passionate about, maybe it's music NFTs, whatever it is, like if it is music NFTs, you can go back and try to just take an hour and try to reconstruct all of the people experimenting and tinkering with audio and tokenizing that audio and tokenizing their music. There's just a very interesting timeline for all of these categories, and I would highly recommend. I really think it's worth it to see how that kind of niche evolved, because what we very clearly see is people are influenced by the experimenters and creators before them, and you can literally see this in the art. Like I was talking about the Satoshi card from Spells of Genesis earlier. Well, that influenced the Nakamoto card from Rare Pepes that came out a year later. And then that influenced 6529's The Memes collection. Everybody knows like the Freedom Nakamoto card, right? And then that then influences all these other people who are creating derivatives of the memes. And you see these like early, most people collecting like the 6529 cards really don't know that history necessarily of maybe the Satoshi card or the Nakamoto card, but it does. The history still flourishes and the influence is very clearly there. And I think it's important to understand that kind of historical context. So yeah, with that, this is basically my summary. I won't go too deep into 2021 and beyond here because it really just does go kind of parabolic. We have about 2,000 ERC 721 contracts created in 2018, 3,000 in 2019, and then by the time we get to 2021, it's like I think it's around maybe 80,000 in 2021, and then now we're at like 500,000 roughly. So it just goes parabolic there. And yeah, that is my presentation. I really appreciate you guys learning about some history here with me, hopefully, and hopefully having just a better way to contextualize anything that you see in this space with a little bit of the history of how we got to where we are. Thank you.